Hello and welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I am Michael Pinter, where I teach you how to start flipping or wholesaling houses. Why is everything shaking? I don't know why that is. I think my camera's a little screwed up. Sorry. Okay. So I got a question. What is a due diligence period? I don't like this camera angle at all. Whatever. Whatever. Okay. We'll have to fix that later. We'll fix it in post-production. So due diligence period can mean a lot of different things. It depends if you're a buyer, it depends if you're a seller, it depends if you're in New York or if you're out of New York, it depends if it's commercial, it depends if it's residential. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's talk about, first of all, what due diligence means. Due diligence just means research, checking to see if what's going on here. If you're a seller, you may do due diligence on the buyer, right? When we sell properties, I check the buyer. They have a pre-approval. I actually call the mortgage company. I had a lot of experience in the mortgage business, so I go and I say to them, do you really know if this guy's good or not? That's due diligence. Due diligence in general means a buyer's due diligence in checking into a property. So let's start with commercial first. So commercial, and a commercial transaction, so understand what commercial and residential. Residential is anything, 1 to 4 family property is residential. Commercial is anything else. So 5 units or more is commercial. There's this. Move that better. Move my microphone closer. And any residential, any office, hotel, medical, that's all commercial. So on a commercial transaction and you're buying it, usually in the contract is a due diligence period, which means, hey, I'm going to contract, I'm giving you a deposit, but I have a month, 2 months, depending on the size of the transaction. If it's a large transaction, it might be longer, period of time to check all your paperwork, right? I want to check the leases. I want to see all the tenants. I want to get a list of tenants. I want to know if these are people who I think are going to pay. I want to get an idea of work you've done. I want to get an idea of capital improvements. When did you do the roof? There's a lot of work, right? That's typical due diligence on a commercial property. Now, and as a seller, you may want to do due diligence during that period too, where you want to look at the buyer and say, is this a guy who's going to really be able to pay, right? Now, in 49 states, on a residential transaction, there is a inspection period, due diligence period on a contract. So what that means is that in 49 states, a real estate transaction happens between a buyer and a seller. Buyer wants to buy a property, seller wants to sell. Buyer whips out a contract and says, here, I want to buy it, but I want any 2 weeks to figure out, I'm going to do an inspection and see if there's any problems that I don't know about. Technically, that's a due diligence period. Now, that does not apply in New York. During that period, in California, they call it, we're in escrow. I don't know why they use that stupid term. I mean, California uses escrow companies to actually use the money, but in most other states, it's just called in contract. And during that period of time, either party usually can walk away from the transaction. Now, in New York, that doesn't take place. In New York, because a real estate transaction happens between a seller's attorney and a buyer's attorney, not between a buyer and a seller. So when a seller agrees to sell me a property, what happens next is he has to engage an attorney who's going to send the contract to my attorney. Now, there is no due diligence period in most residential contracts. What happens is that after a price is agreed to, then a home inspection is done. And if there are any repairs that the buyer wants done, they'll put it into the contract. Now, why is it different in New York? The reason why it's different in New York is because most attorneys are complete jerk-offs, and they don't want to write up a contract that has an easy out to it. So, if it's very rare to find an attorney that will write up a contract and will say there'll be an easy out for the buyer. Now, most contracts of simple house-to-house transactions will have a mortgage contingency, which we've spoken about before, and I will tell you really is an easy out for the buyer. But because it's just standard, it's rare that an attorney will refuse to write up a contract with a mortgage contingency on a regular transaction. But it is very common for an attorney to refuse to write up a contract where there's an inspection contingency. The idea being, if you really want to dig into this, is that the attorney doesn't get paid unless the deal closes. Attorneys feel like, I'm not going to write up a contract where somebody could just walk away. That's the truth. So there really is no due diligence period on a standard residential transaction in New York. So if you're watching this for the first time and you may have come from some other guru on the internet who told you wholesaling is completely risk-free because you go into contract and if you don't find a buyer, you just jump out. It doesn't work in New York. In New York, every contract that I go into, I have to either assign or I have to close. Those are my two choices. I don't have any outs, ever, right? Unless there's a title problem, right? I've had issues with title, and then you can get out of the contract. But short of that, you got to go through with the transaction, which at first glance is scary. But as you get more experience in this, you realize that if you're locking up properties at good enough prices, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? I sleep well at night because almost every property that I buy, I have options, right? I can try and wholesale it, I can close on it, and I know that I'm going to do okay eventually. Okay, so what are we left with here? What haven't I covered? I don't know. I mean, we're 5.5 minutes into a 10-minute recording, and I don't know what to talk about anymore. So let's talk about what kind of due diligence you might want to do. So obviously, if you're wholesaling, you want to put it out to your list and see if you can possibly find a buyer for it. Now, there are risks involved if you're going to wholesale a deal in New York and put it out to your list before you're really in contract, right? You could lose the deal, right? The seller might find out that you marketed the property and say, F you. Someone theoretically could go around you, but in truth is, listen, if you're a real buyer like I am, and you are not full of crap, most of the people who you're going to market to are going to understand that the chance of you putting out a deal that's not under contract is almost infinitesimally small. So there is some risk, but I would say, if you don't know if it's a deal or not, you might want to do that. Put it out to the list. Now, if you don't have a list, there's a whole discussion I have about lists. I believe very strongly that you should not even start to build a buyer's list until you have a deal. I know other people teach other things. Reverse wholesaling. Reverse wholesaling sounds amazing to me, right? Find a buyer, find what they want, and then go give it to them. Amazing. Just not that simple in New York. Because in New York, we have an incredibly diverse amount of product, right? In certain parts of Florida where everything's built after 1980, you say, oh, I want a concrete block structure, CBS, property, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, ranch. In New York, everything's all over the place. And I have really good buyers who I've sold, a dozen properties to. And if I called them today, or anybody called them today, and these are real guys, and said, hey, what are you looking for? They would not give any criteria. Anything. They would say anything I can make money on. That's what they would say. So the idea that I'm going to call up, in theory, buyers and say, ask them what they want, and they're going to give me something specific that I can go out and find, I think it's absurd. I'm sorry. Maybe it works in other places. I can't imagine it working here. So I'm very happy with finding buyers after you have a deal. Once you have a deal, then you can look for local buyers. You can, listen, I have a whole thing on building a buyer's list, but I believe very strongly that what a lot of people do when they get into this business is they waste their time on things that seem easy. It's really easy to build a buyer's list, right? I think Greg Helbeck and I decided it's mental masturbation, right? You feel great. I'm building a buyer's list. But do you really know if these are real buyers? Do you really know? Because you're basically calling somebody up and saying, hey, I can make you some money. Are you interested? Everybody's going to say yes. For all you know, this guy's never going to buy from you. For all you know, he's not a serious buyer. For all you know, he's a one-off buyer. For all you know, he only buys in one city and you got stuff and you're never going to have anything in that city. So I'm a big believer in building your buyer's list after you have a deal. If you have a deal, you put it out to you can. There are a lot of ways I can help you building that list. Okay, or if you wanted the easy route, right, you can partner up, JV with somebody like me who has a list already, and I'll put it out there, and I'll probably get more money from it than you would on a smaller list. So I do that a lot. I JV with people. They bring a deal. I find them. I put up my money for the deposit. Use my attorney and. Damon, you're looking at my post-it notes. Thank you. That's the angle I didn't want to show. Those are my deal board. Thank you for noticing my bad camera angle. All right. So basically, due diligence is something that and most of the time it's used for a buyer to do before he buys property. There really is no due diligence period in a contract in New York. In other states, they do have it, and it's pretty standard on commercial transactions. Okay. I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in all the ways I can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you are interested in finding out about my course that teaches how to do what I do, go to howtoflipnewyorkcourse.com. If you are interested in finding out more about one-on-one coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're watching on any channel, please click the thumbs up. The likes really help me. A lot more people have been seeing my videos lately. And please keep the comments coming. There are no bad comments. You can ask a comment about any topic. It doesn't have to be about the video you're watching. If it's a simple answer, I'll just reply with an answer. If it's a topic I've covered in depth, I'll send you a link to a video. And if it's something new, I will do a new video on it. So thank you very, very much for watching.